A nation at a crossroads. The rise of strongmen and the threat to democracy. America stands at the precipice of history, facing a crisis that echoes the darkest chapters of the past. The world has seen what happens when strongmen consolidate power, when democracy is undermined from within, and when those sworn to uphold justice instead bend the knee to authoritarian rule. Today, we witness a U.S. president aligning himself with war criminals, Vladimir Putin and Benjamin Netanyahu, leaders who have shown utter contempt for human rights, international law, and democratic principles. Rather than standing firm against their tyranny, our highest offices caved, making America a puppet state for the worst of global authoritarianism. This is not leadership. This is a coup unfolding before our eyes. The MAGA elite, corporate oligarchs like Elon Musk, and a billionaire class that sees democracy as an obstacle rather than a necessity, have created a regime that prioritizes power over people. They seek control, they push division, and they threaten the very foundation of the Constitution they claim to defend. We cannot ignore the warning signs. We cannot allow America to descend into a nation ruled by strongmen, where dissent is criminalized, where the military is used against its own people, and where internment camps become a reality under the guise of law and order. The duty of the U.S. military and the American people, every soldier, every official, and every American swore an oath not to a president, not to a party, but to the Constitution of the United States. That oath demands loyalty to the principles of democracy, not blind obedience to an authoritarian state. The military's duty is to protect the nation, not serve as enforcers for fascist rule. History has taught us that silence is complicity. This is not the time to wait. This is the moment to stand. Revolutions do not always come with guns and violence. They come with the refusal to comply with tyranny, with the courage to speak out, and with the collective power of the people who will not be ruled by fear. We are at that moment now. The question is, will America choose democracy, or will we fall to the rule of strongmen? The time to act is now. For years, we have heard the phrase, all politics is local. The idea suggests that meaningful change starts at the community level, where elected officials are closest to the people they represent. Yet, in reality, local political structures have often served as gatekeepers for national elite interests rather than champions for their constituents. Betrayal at the local level. For a decade, I have fought to get my local leaders, Democrats, labor unions, and faith organizations to advocate for meaningful federal human rights solutions for injured American workers, immigrant families, and struggling communities. My goal was simple. Put issues like a National Workers' Compensation Commission, American Families United Act, and Medicare for All on the table. Instead of support, I was silenced, ignored, and dismissed as unhinged. Who betrayed us? Congressman Rick Larsen has refused to take a meaningful stance on these issues, despite repeated outreach and advocacy. State Representative Mary Foss has claimed to stand for workers' rights, but has done nothing for injured workers. Former State Representative Mike Sells, a so-called labor champion, ignored the pleas of injured workers and sided with corporate interests. Mary Foss, instead of fighting for real change, has prioritized political maneuvering over standing up for workers. The Washington State Labor Council has failed to take a strong stance on workers' compensation reform, despite its platform of advocating for labor rights. Snohomish County Democrats, who have championed progressive policies publicly, have refused to engage in meaningful action for injured workers and immigrant families. Our Revolution Washington, the Green Party, Jason Call, Dr. Jill Stein, Kshama Sawant, and Tyler Vega have been absent in these struggles, unwilling to put real effort into pushing local officials to act. Faith leaders, including those in the Poor People's Campaign, have ignored these issues even when presented with the moral case for action. The hypocrisy of local leaders, these same Democrats who campaign on immigrant rights and labor protections, just voted to pass the Laken-Riley Act, a bill that criminalizes immigrants under the guise of public safety. Where were the local leaders who claimed to stand for social justice? They ignored the National Workers' Compensation Commission, leaving injured workers to fend for themselves. They stayed silent on the American Families United Act, refusing to fight for immigrant families facing separation. They failed to challenge the erosion of labor rights and national worker protections. Yet, when it comes to policies that serve corporate interests and nationalist agendas, they suddenly find their voice. Local politics as a cover for national fascism. The truth is that local political leaders are not separate from national power structures. They are the ones who shield corporate elites and enforce the status quo. By refusing to push back against the oligarchy, local politicians create the illusion of democracy while allowing fascist policies, economic exploitation, and mass incarceration to take root. Labor unions and faith leaders, who should be at the forefront of defending workers and marginalized communities, have instead played the role of enablers. Rather than mobilizing their power for real change, they have settled for token advocacy, while the most vulnerable continue to suffer. Conclusion: the fight must continue. If all politics is truly local, then it is at the local level that we must demand accountability. We must expose the hypocrisy of those who claim to represent the people while protecting the interests of the elite. We must challenge not just the national policymakers, but the local leaders who allow these injustices to persist. The betrayal of Rick Larson, Mary Foss, Mike Sells, Emily Wicks, the Washington State Labor Council, Snohomish County Democrats, Our Revolution, the Green Party, and faith leaders is a wake-up call.